And welcome back to the Sports Fix on this Wednesday. Still to come for you, the curling machine, along with some horse racing, motor racing and Origin. But right now, we've got the stat man, Jace. I'm just wondering, should I book my tickets and accommodation to Brisbane in 2032? Do you think it's too early, or should I hurry up and do it?
Well, you could do it, I reckon, fairly safely. It looks as though that's where we're going. It's an Olympic year. That's right, 2021 is an Olympic year. It's a bizarre situation the world has been faced with over the last 12 months, but hopefully there will be an Olympic Games later on this year in Japan. But 2032, Brisbane, or at least southeast Queensland, we are the preferred location. When I say we, we're not worrying about state party lines this time. It's we as Australia. Can't wait, Clayton.
But there's another country that's putting up a bit of a fight, and they're known for putting up a fight. Germany. We could be going to Germany instead.
Well, let's talk about the process. We've touched on this a little bit on the Flow Friday Night Sports Show, but haven't gone into the detail that it deserves. So the way the process works now is a little different than when Sydney won the rights to the 2000 Olympic Games. That's right, the winner was Sydney. Maybe this time it is Brisbane, but it's done a different way now. Rather than have a number of countries and a number of cities spending ungodly amounts of money on bids, what happens is at the initial starting point, people put their bids in, and then the IOC announce its preferred host. And then it's up to the preferred host to tick a whole host of boxes. And Brisbane was announced as the IOC's preferred host. So there's no doubt Brisbane is in the box seat to host the 2032 Olympic Games. It is theirs to lose at this point, Clayton.
It's I'm thinking about it, and you think, well, it's so far away. You know, why are we worrying about it now? It's just because of the infrastructure and all the things that need to get built. In the meantime, they don't happen very quickly. They've got to take time to the planning and the costing and all that. So I can understand that it's going to take some time and talking about it and that. And I think Brisbane would be a preferred option. They've got a lot of things already in there in southeast Queensland. There are a lot of stadiums and facilities, especially with the swimming centre. We've seen that with the Commonwealth Games. So they've got a lot of things already in the bag that they don't need to really reinvent the wheel on.
Well, they do, but there's obviously a few things that will need to be upgraded and updated. And this has been going on, bubbling along behind the scenes for quite some time. In fact, the feasibility study was completed, I believe, or commissioned in 2019. But right all the way back to 2016, a local mayor's group met back then, and they wanted the feasibility study done all the way back then. So you're talking, 4 or 5 years ago now, the process began to get this up and going. It looks as though now they're going to have to commit somewhere around $1.2 to $1.3 billion. $900 million of state and federal funds will be needed initially just to lock that away, to commit as part of the process. But it's expected that $500 million will be needed beyond that to upgrade existing venues in some instances. So there's a lot of money that's going to go into this. There always is, but obviously the return on hosting Olympic Games, we saw in Sydney what it did for that city, and it really does put countries on the map. So for a country the size of Australia to have hosted 3 Olympic Games in less than 150 years of the Games' history is a staggering achievement, really, when you think about it. It absolutely solidifies our place in Oceania as the sporting capital of Oceania, no question about that.
Well, it's 21 years and we still talk about Sydney and how great it was, and you often, in Olympic conversations, it gets referenced to. So, yeah, Sydney sort of set the standard, I think. And there are other cities that have had the Games before and since that you struggle to remember, but I think Brisbane could easily equal what Sydney put on back 21 years ago.
Well, it should have the weather on its side. You mentioned the German bid, which they're not going away without a fight. They're still following through with putting a formal bid in, and should Australia's bid fall, well, the Rhine-Ruhr is putting in a bid of their own. That's a northern state in Germany, North Rhine. They're putting it in. Cities include Dusseldorf, up that way, and a whole host of cities, Clayton, that I can't even begin to look at pronouncing.
I'll help you with the pronunciations afterwards. I'm just wondering if they miss out, and maybe in some ways it's better for it to be Brisbane in 2032, because 2036, it would be exactly 100 years since Germany hosted the Games, and that was back in the Nazi regime, and this might be a way of almost sort of going past that memory and doing a good thing for Germany to have it 100 years since then. So maybe 2036 would be a better year for him.
It's a good point, Clayton. Hadn't thought of that. Jesse James Olympics, where he thumbed his nose at Hitler at the time, and we know what came of that less than half a decade later. So, look, that's a really fair point to make. The reality is, though, with Brisbane's bid, is it is in the box seat. It's going to host the Olympics. And I love the fact that we know 11 years out. If you think about the logistics of this, obviously there's a lot of work that's going to have to go into it to get everything up to scratch and up to speed, and lots of investment, we know that. But more importantly, look at kids now that are 7, 8, 9 years old that might be athletes in that Olympic Games. We saw how we built towards Sydney, with the big gap in the announcement being made, and then how athletes were preparing and the money that got poured into sport. I'm hoping we see something similar. I'm hoping we see Olympic sports given a real funding boost in the lead up to what would be 2032, and that Australia can have a real crack on the world stage at its own Games in Brisbane, hopefully leading the medal tally, or at least being right up there with some of our world-class athletes put on show for the world to see.
Yes, I'm sort of imagining it as you're saying it right now, and if you're a young kid and you're starting to think, a sport that you're just starting to get good at, and all the extra training, and who knows, you could be representing your country on your home soil, of all things to do, and it certainly would have a lot of meaning.
If you're an 8-year-old swimmer right now, Clayton, you've got to be excited. You'd have to be.
And Mum and Dad would be excited and be just dropping some subtle hints as well.
Yeah. So it's all good for Australia. There's no question about that. We've seen the benefits that Olympics can bring to a city. We've also seen some of the downside. We've seen ghost cities and ghost venues in Brazil left to rack and ruin.
Yeah, Russia.
So there are some things that we need to be aware of when it comes to this, and I think Australia's better placed than perhaps a place like Rio, and even in Athens, where some of their venues have gone to rack and ruin since the Olympics. So I think we're better placed than those countries to move past that. But there are some warnings that need to be acknowledged along the way as well.
And here's one for you. They like to introduce sports at the Olympics, and even if they're a demonstration sport, could we see AFL introduced at the 2032 Brisbane Olympics? No.
Straight out, no. It's too soon for that. I don't think we will see football introduced, but if you have a look at the timeline where we're going to be hosting it, what we have, look out for cricket to make a return, particularly as the shortened versions of the game are becoming more and more popular. If it hasn't already been introduced by 2032, yes, I would expect that we might see even the 100 version that they have in England, something like that could certainly get a run in 2032, Clayton.
What about a chook raffle?
Well, that's an option as well. Surf lifesaving is another one that I've heard as some of the events that they have as part of that has been floated, particularly given the beautiful surf that they'll have at their disposal down on the Gold Coast. So that's another one that could make its debut at those Olympics, and I kind of hope it does, to be honest.
Yeah, or maybe they could decide instead of a normal coin toss, it could be a bit of two-up.
Well, that'd be quite handy as well. I'm not sure about gambling as an Olympic sport, but
we won't go there.
I think two-up is best restricted to our Diggers on Anzac Day for mine, Clayton.
Absolutely. All right, thanks, Jace. We'll continue more with this conversation as the time goes on, and more on the Sports Fix coming up. Thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you again tomorrow, Jace.
Pleasure, mate. Looking forward